We are told just in the last few minutes that the White House and Republican negotiators did reach a deal.
Okay, I don't know how much rest you've gotten, but let's dive in because you got a deal.
President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy have a deal to avoid defaulting on the country's debt.
We start, though, at the White House, where the president just signed the debt ceiling bill into law.
Joe Biden and Republicans agreed to raise the debt ceiling for the U.S. So what does that actually mean? This part is 15 seconds long. If you already know what that means, skip ahead. If not, stick around and I'll tell you. Well, basically, it's like your mom and dad agreeing to continue to use the credit card to continue paying bills. Is that healthy? No. Do they have to do it? Yes. Why? Because if they don't and the US defaults on its debt, then every kind of debt loses credibility, which means your mortgage, your car loans, your small business loans, your student loans, everything becomes sus. And when things become suspect, then interest rates rise. Okay, with that being said, here's what's actually in the debt bill. Here's a quick rundown.
Okay, so let's put on the screen some of the provisions of the law. I know we did that in the introduction. Imposes new caps on federal spending for 2 years, restarts the federal student loan repayments, imposes new work requirements for food stamps, cuts $1.8 billion in IRS funding, rescinds $30 billion in unspent COVID funds.
So let's run that back. First up, it raises the debt limit through January 2025. Well, that's key. Why? Because the 2024 campaign ends on November 4th, so that puts Republicans and Democrats in a place to not have to worry about the debt ceiling through the election. That's huge. Or as one politician says, huge.
Huge, 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 huge.
Next, it restarts the federal student loan payments. And while liberal Democrats were a little upset by this has long been in the works from within the Biden administration.
Why did the president agree, to codify an end to the student debt repayments pause that also prevents him from using any future moratoria or interest rate reductions?
Remember, we, of course, have a court case that is ongoing, but at some point, we were going to also reinstitute payment after a pause, and this was actually very close to the time frame we were considering in the administration.
Right, and in fact, it's September that debt repayments were supposed to start.
Next, it changes the work requirements for food stamps.
I think if you look at the overall vote, you find that Democrats were broadly supportive of this deal. And look, again, yes, this would not be what they would have done.
See that?
I think if you look at the overall vote, you find that Democrats were broadly supportive of this deal. And look, again, yes, this would not be what they would have done.
You see that? Right there. That's it. And this is how Democrats feel about it.
Let me tell people what's going to happen, what this bill proposes to do for food stamps, where it would make the biggest difference. First of all, it would extend the current work requirements now to those aged 50 and 54 who are not required to have those work requirements under current law. Now, it would also exempt veterans, foster youth, and those who are experiencing homeless from work requirements. The White House says when you put those two things together, you have the same number of people on food stamps, but there's no question expanding that age for work requirement would mean 200 or more thousand people would be having those work requirements, and there's some worry from the left that some would fall off.
Do you plan on voting for this?
I just got off of a White House briefing on the SNAP and TANF benefits. I'm waiting for one more update on the actual numbers and the impact on the people in my district that sent me to Washington to represent their voice. Right now, what I'm hearing leans me to vote yes on this.
So, it's iffy. Next, it cuts $1.8 billion from the IRS. But that's okay, because the IRS just got an $80 billion increase to its funding. But there's a side deal to cut even more after the fact, cutting up to $20 billion from the IRS. So there's that.
I want to ask you about a couple of specifics. This doesn't really add any revenue, right? Not that it was intended to, but it does claw back some of that $80 billion that was intended for the IRS, which some estimates said could increase revenues. What impact could that clawback have?
Well, the Congressional Budget Office and other experts say that if you give the IRS money, they get more tax revenue. So scaling that back will reduce the amount of money that the IRS will collect. Now, there was $80 billion approved for the IRS last year. There's an agreement, although it's not in the text of the bill, to scale that back $20 billion and divert that money to other spending. But the White House says that the IRS still has access to that $60 billion and can start spending it now.
Finally, it imposes a cap on federal spending for 2 years. That, with the cumulative cuts, should change the overall debt trajectory.
Let's talk about what it would do for that debt kind of trajectory, which has been so core for Republicans. This is where we are right now. The current curve, $1.6 trillion. This is the spending right now for the U.S. last year. Here's where the curve was headed before this deal. Now let's look at what the deal would do if it's passed. You see it would show that spending would be much less, about,
It also rescinds unspent COVID money. So to sum it up, the debt deal has 4 major parts. 1, student loan repayments restart. 2, new work requirements for food stamps. 3, $1.8 billion in IRS cuts. And 4, it extends the debt limit through 2025. Plus, there's a little side deal for West Virginia to run a pipeline. You gotta give Joe Manchin something.
Signing off. Peace. Hey, if you like this video, please smash that like button and hit subscribe. We would love to see you again. So take it easy. Peace.